Okay, so before I lay this paint on here, I just want to quickly preface with something. So I'm going to paint this black, and then I'm going to start putting whites on it, okay, with the airbrush. Why am I going to do that? Because remember how I talked earlier about light is the white and then shadow, right? So we lay in this really dark shadow and then we apply white, which is light, shadow, light. Like a good example would be if you looked at the top of a stop sign, you know the octagon? How it goes like this. And if the sunshine is up here, like that, then you want almost like strong white here, average white here, shades of white here, less white if any there, and black under here. If you impose this philosophy on the model, like you can see here, see how the top should have more white. See the shadow here? This would maybe be against the building if you like to think that much about it. And then everything underneath is probably going to be darker because of shadow, okay? So sometimes it helps to just look at the model and then just turn it under like one light. Like let's just turn this one light off here, and then you can see how it changes. See, just try to look at the shadow. See where my thumb is back here? See how it blends, right? So we like to try to apply that artificially because it helps enhance the illusion, right? Like here's a good practice to understand that if you ever like to doodle or do something, you know, like on the side. Draw a box with 5 squares in it like this, and then try to scratch in with a pencil or a pen from light to dark, but gradually 5 times. Like my wife teaches this a lot. She's an art teacher, and it helps instill in your mind that color graduation, right? See, so you go like that, and then you go a little bit darker here. The lines are maybe closer together, right? And then you go even more. This is a really good exercise. Like you think it's sort of monotonous or mundane, but it really helps you understand that principle. Then even more here. So you're staying longer in the box, right? And then the last one, you're going to spend more time than all the previous ones to make it darker. Okay, so you have light, almost white, almost black, and you get this graduation. If you understand that principle when you're painting a model with black and white basing out, start with black and then build up with white and then apply colors later, then you'll just eventually through practice you'll achieve that look that pops back at you. And when you put lights on it, whatever lights you choose to put on your layout, it'll enhance it even more. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'll just start with, so I'm not worried about getting any white paint underneath. That's all shadow, so I want to, clamping it down is a good idea because you won't turn it over to paint it white. But you can move the airbrush like around, like if the sunlight's coming down from like this angle here. You know, I want to work it down like that, right? And then stay longer on the high points. So I'm just going to turn it gently and just let the white catch all the railings, the ribs, the brass photo etch grating, the ladders. And you want thin here, you want very thin, right? Because if it's not opaque enough, you can always add another layer, right? But this way you know you're going to be so thin, so you're not building up thick paint here because the layers are microscopic. You're just putting light coats on and watching it come to life with light. Okay? Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that white, which I just dumped out about half, so I only have about 50% of that white in there. That's fairly thin, right? Once again, I don't measure ratios. It's just not something that a person does when they've been doing it a long time. So if you're looking for that kind of thing, you won't find it with me. So I want people to learn to feel their paint and to feel their mix through experience, and that's how you learn. Like, you won't learn nothing if you're going by a fixed numbers and menus all the time, right? Not when it comes to this game. Like I say, it's a different story if you're looking for Conrail blue. Right. So I'm going to take some of this Deck Tan XF55. It's like a beigey color. I'm going to add quite a bit to this. Now I want to tone this white down a bit and start putting some color onto it. Okay. And this is just straight from the bottle. Okay. Which would have been mixed from default new, just topped up with isopropyl. So there's a bit of weight to it. Let's see what that looks like. I don't know if you can tell there, but what color it is, really, in terms of the shade. And again, I just want to give strokes up and down. You know, the light white color gives you a good opportunity to read what's going on with your high points. It's like a guide, right? So now you can get in a little bit tighter and stay a little bit longer on things. But remember, you don't want to get underneath. Leave that dark. Remember the fence? The top of the fence was blue-gray and the bottom was black, right? This time I'm going to just stay a little bit longer on it, a little bit heavier. This pipe will be probably painted with a wash, a different color. That's okay. Let all the colors play together. Just get a little bit heavier so you can see what's going on more. See? Build it up slow. Okay, so notice the extractor, like the base legs here. See how dark they are in here? That's artificial shadow, right? That's just when I overspray. I don't focus in these areas. I just let the overspray fall, the light. See, so you're enhancing that scale light and shadow effect, which doesn't occur normally in the one-to-one real world. Depending on the scale, the larger the model, the more the real world physics light and shadow plays more realistically. But the smaller the scale, the more you need to enhance light and shadow for it to pop and really sort of give you that illusion, right? So if I was to look underneath here, it's still quite that dark gray black almost, which doesn't need to be painted. And if you go down to view at it, it makes sense. Like you'll see later when it's painted on the model or the diorama in front of the brewery, like you'll see that later, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work in some more beige on this big cylinder here, and then on these high points brighten it up a little bit, and then see what it looks like. Okay, and I test a lot too. Like notice how I test, you know, the color. See, obviously I'm not going to do this, right? I'm going to do this. Pull back on the trigger ever so slightly, so just a little bit of paint, and turn it into a pencil. See? See the difference there? And just a tiny bit of paint, and that's what you want. I'm just going to go up and down between these ribs. Leaving some of the gray too, like just random lines up and down. Won't hurt, right? It adds variation. And if your paint is very thin, it'll go on and you'll think the color is rich in tone, but when it dries it'll fade away. That's what you want. Like here. Notice how there's no color in behind the ladder rungs? Well, why would there be? There's going to be shadow there, right? Watch when you do this side. I got a little bit too much there. See, too much paint in it. A little tiny run. See, now I'm coming back and I'm bringing it out more, see? It's all about take your time layers, build up super thin layers. That way you can look at it and go, you know, I kind of like this, I'm going to leave that. So you can analyze your model over a longer period and watch it develop in terms of its tone and color. That's the key. Very, very thin paint. High PSI, 35. Very thin. Practice on the side just to get with the right amount, right? Like you don't want this, right? Do you? You want this. When you're there for a while, a tiny amount of paint. Just squeeze on that trigger and pull back a tiny bit, right? That muscle memory will come. It will come if you practice. Right? Everybody has to practice. Okay, so for the airbrush work then, I just want to finish up with a bit of light blue on the ladders and this pipe. And I'm not too worried about a little bit of overspray. I just want to keep the bulk of it away from the rest of the beige. Okay, and then I can just go with washes later, and it'll blend a lot. Any overspray will get blended away anyway. So I'll just take a little bit of light blue, and in this case you can use XF23 light blue is a nice color, I find, like a highlight for gray. Okay. Once again, it's just a hint of a color change, right? But it's soft and gradual. Only suggesting that color, that light and gray, with just a subtle shift from the rest of it. Okay, so these are some of the brushes that I use. These two are grainers. You'll see that they have a sort of split tips to them for graining effects, which I generally use with oils. You can use them with acrylics too, but I generally use those with oils to finish with rust streaks. There's a 1/2 inch and a 3/4. Then I just have a regular 1/2 inch level brush that's really soft, very soft for washes and blending, and then a similar one, a 3/4, that's a little more stiff. I mean, anyone that paints knows they have more brushes than they can count, probably, right? And then some of these smaller ones, like a 0 and number 1, and here's a number 6 round blender that I like for oils, mostly for just blending. So it's all personal. Every artist, painter, whatever, modeler, they all have their own personal paintbrushes that they like. So I have others, like stiff. I like oil brushes. They're stiff, coarse brushes. They're designed for a lot of, stabbing and rough housing, right? And then the acrylics are generally usually a softer brush, but then the small detail brushes, like a number 1, is about as small as I go. Okay, so that's just a portion of them. You just go with whatever you feel. It's personal for each individual. Every model presents its own challenges. So when you're using this method, if you lay it down, it's going to pool and run. So I like to get it wet first, just in case paint runs, and I don't want it to dry like a stain, like an undesirable flood mark. So I try to get as much water on the model so I can move it around later, and it'll help suspend the dry time, not cure, but dry time of the acrylic, which is quite rapid, which is an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage if you decide to walk away and forget about it, because a lot of those stains you're not going to be able to remove with isopropyl, because you'll ruin the whole deal. You'll cut through all your base layers, as I mentioned before. So I'll just try a little bit of this dark sea gray first, see what it does. And here's 2 brushes, old beat up brushes, but I love them, for this level of work anyway. Just going to take a little bit and just plop a little bit on and see what it does. Okay. And then I'm going to hit it with, chase it with water right away. Lots of water. This will help create a little bit of subtle shadow on those ribs. Once you get the water going and the paint going, you get more into it. Things start working in your favor. You start getting into that zone. By the time you're done, you should have all kinds of water and paint and stain all over your paper here. Okay, you can see I've just been working it over here, just stabbing in light sea gray, very little bit of burnt umber in places up high here where I'll see some on the photo. Add a little bit of green sometimes down in here where there might be moss growing in the shady areas. Working from this, I really like these yogurt tray lids. And when they're a little deformed, they'll pool to one side, and I use this slurry. I don't get rid of that. If I want clean water, I'll just pull it from a side from a jar to clean the brush. Okay. But if you're not feeling good about things, add more water. Okay, so you can see where it's at now. Okay, so the water-based wet on wet filters and layers and washes and such are drying right now. You notice I'll just combine those terms, filters, washes, layers. I just, with wet on wet, I just see it as one big process. I don't, get too hung up on that because they all develop and come out the way they do with the water and the color. Like, I don't get too picky, although I do understand that layers is really the key. So let's just summarize quick about the layers. First, we painted it, to me, a flat black with the airbrush, right? Okay, remember? And then what we did was we oversprayed with white. And then after that, we took deck tan or buff. In this case, I used deck tan to achieve that, standard base color. And then I used some really light blue for around the ladders and stuff. So those are the four Tamiya IPA-based paints that I used to spray with the airbrush. Then what I did was I took these three colors right here. NATO green, dark sea gray, and burnt umber. Okay. With wet on wet, just water and a big fat number 10 brush, like I just demonstrated, and that's what it ends up looking like. Now you can leave it that way if you want. I'm going to leave this, put it aside and let it dry, but and then I'll revisit it the next day, so, because I don't call it done yet. But we'll take it a little bit further than that, obviously, to touch up and pick out details. And I really like the way the cylinder turned out. Like right now in this state, it looks like it maybe survived a fire or something, or just massive sun bleaching and weathering. Some might be okay with that. I'll probably tone that down a little bit because I don't find the brewery to be that old. I like this particular structure. But I do like the weathered look, as you most know. That's part of my signature, or your signature if you develop it that way, right? There's just something about weathering a model that just makes it feel real and more immersive, okay? Okay, so I pretty much have this um, based out now, and then I put the washes on it. It's a little more weathered than the prototype, but I'm okay with that because I'm going to fade some of it now, and I've taken some white oil, just straight oil, off a piece of cardboard, so the cardboard helps suck the oil out of the pigment, and that way it'll dry a lot quicker, like overnight. Set up pretty good for you, and then you can flat coat it. So I added just a little bit of umber, tiny, just a, the end of a paintbrush tip, just to tint it, to put it into a kind of almost a deck tan beige. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stab in some colors like this, and then I'm just going to work it with a round brush and just soften some of these flood marks and just work in a bit of fade. Okay. This goes a long ways too, this oil. But the beauty of it is its transparent quality and the ability that it blends so easily and doesn't dry fast like acrylic does. This is what I like to finish with. I've talked about this before. I don't always apply oils, but I want to in this case because these are, they're feature models. So see, so you can still see the stains, but it's just a little bit more of a highlight on there. And this has been clear coated with gloss before I apply the oil. It's a really good method to dry brush as well because the oil doesn't dry fast like an acrylic would. Okay. Like I say, each to his own on this, whatever you decide that you want to stop. I'm just going to do a little bit on this because I really like this the way it looks. I'll do a little bit on the legs here, just a little bit of dry brushing, and then I'm going to call it done.